They say pride blinds the heart until it can no longer recognize truth, even when it stands before it. In the bustling city of Lagos, a wealthy man found comfort in a quiet maid, unaware she was his own wife, Nosipho, watching his betrayal unfold. And when the truth finally revealed itself, it did not whisper, it shattered everything he thought he owned. If you have ever trusted someone blindly, stay with us. This story may speak to you. In every city, there is a house people admire from a distance and whisper about when the doors are closed. In the heart of Lagos stood such a house, tall and gleaming with polished gates that reflected the sun like a mirror of pride. It belonged to Obinna, a man whose name carried weight in business circles, whose handshake sealed deals, and whose presence commanded silence. They said he built his empire with discipline and ambition. But those who watched closely knew that Obinna loved power more than people. And in that grand house lived Nosipho, his wife. Nosipho was not loud, nor was she adorned with the kind of glitter that drew attention. She was quiet strength, the kind that holds a home together without asking for praise. Her voice was gentle, but her mind was sharp. She understood people in ways Obinna never cared to. Where he saw status, she saw souls. But even the strongest hearts can grow tired when they are unseen. At the beginning of their marriage, Obinna had once looked at Nosipho with warmth. He had admired her calm spirit, her wisdom. But as his wealth grew, so did his pride. Slowly, almost like a shadow creeping at dusk, his attention drifted away. Business meetings stretched into late nights. Conversations became shorter. Laughter disappeared from their dining table. Nosipho noticed. She noticed how his eyes no longer rested on her, how his words carried impatience instead of care, how silence filled spaces where love once lived. But she said nothing, because sometimes a wise woman listens before she speaks. Then came Halima. Halima was everything that glittered in Obinna's world, elegant, bold, and intoxicating. She walked into rooms like she owned the air itself, her laughter ringing like music that demanded attention. Where Nosipho was calm, Halima was fire. Where Nosipho was depth, Halima was display. Obinna met her at a business event, where deals were signed and egos were fed. Halima knew exactly how to speak to a man like him. She praised his success, admired his ambition, and most importantly, she made him feel seen. "You are not just a man, Obinna," she once said, her eyes lingering just long enough. "You are a king among men." And Obinna believed her. What began as admiration soon became something hidden, something dangerous. Late night calls replaced early dinners. New expenses appeared with no explanation. Gifts, expensive ones, were purchased but never brought home. Instead, they found their way into Halima's hands, wrapped in secrecy and desire. Nosipho saw the signs. A woman always does. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in quiet sorrow, Nosipho stood by the window, watching her husband prepare to leave again. "You are going out?" she asked softly. Obinna adjusted his cufflinks, not meeting her eyes. "Business." There was a pause, a silence heavy with unspoken truth. "You have had many business nights lately," she said gently. He exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across his face. "Must everything be questioned, Nosipho? You worry too much." Worry. That was the word he chose. Not concern, not love, just worry. Nosipho nodded slowly, her heart tightening but her face calm. "I only asked." But inside her, something shifted. Because when a man begins to dismiss your voice, it is no longer a question of if he is hiding something but what. And Nosipho, though quiet, was not blind. She would not fight with noise. She would fight with truth. They say a woman's heart is like the drum of the village it hears, even the faintest rhythm before others notice the sound. Nosipho did not need proof to feel that something in her home had shifted. The air itself had changed. It no longer carried warmth. It carried secrets. Days passed, and Obinna grew more distant. His laughter, once rare but sincere, now appeared only when his phone lit up with messages he never shared. He guarded that phone like a man guarding treasure, tilting the screen away, stepping outside to answer calls, lowering his voice as if truth itself could be hidden behind a whisper. Nosipho watched. She watched the way he dressed more carefully, choosing colognes he had not worn in years. She noticed the new silk ties, the polished shoes, the subtle urgency in his movements whenever evening approached. And still, she said nothing. Because silence, when used wisely, can reveal more than confrontation ever will. One night, as the city lights flickered like distant stars, Obinna returned home later than usual. Nosipho sat in the living room, a book resting untouched on her lap. The clock ticked loudly, marking each second of his absence. "You're awake," Obinna said, surprised, loosening his tie. "I was waiting," Nosipho replied calmly. For what he asked, his tone already defensive. "For my husband," she said softly. There was a pause, a small one but heavy enough to bend the truth. Obinna scoffed lightly. "Nosipho, you make everything sound like a problem. I told you I have work." "And does your work now require perfume that is not yours?" she asked, her eyes steady. His expression hardened. "You are imagining things." "Am I?" she said, her voice still gentle but firm. "Yes," he snapped. "You are becoming suspicious over nothing. It is not attractive. Not attractive." The words hung in the air like a curse. Nosipho lowered her gaze, not in submission but in control. "I did not know trust needed to be attractive," she said quietly. But Obinna had already turned away. And in that moment, Nosipho understood something painful, yet powerful. A man who is guilty will not argue with truth. He will attack the one who speaks it. The next days only deepened her suspicions. A receipt fell from Obinna's jacket one morning, an expensive restaurant, one they had never visited together. A bracelet appeared in his drawer, clearly not meant for her. And once, just once, she heard a name whispered through his phone before he quickly ended the call. Halima. The name lingered in her mind, like smoke. Nosipho did not cry. Instead, she walked. She walked beyond the gates of her home, through the narrow streets where the noise of Lagos softened into quiet corners of wisdom. There, under the shade of an old tree, where stories had been told for generations, sat Mama Adeola. Mama Adeola was a woman time had not defeated. Her back was slightly bent, but her eyes sharp as ever missed nothing. "You carry a storm inside you, child," Mama Adeola said before Nosipho even spoke. Nosipho sat beside her. "My home no longer feels like my home." Mama Adeola nodded slowly, as if she had heard this story before. A man who forgets the value of water will chase mirages in the desert. Nosipho looked down. What should I do? Confront him? Demand the truth? Mama Adeola chuckled softly. Truth does not come when it is chased with anger. It reveals itself when it is given space to breathe. Nosipho frowned slightly. Then how do I see it clearly? The old woman turned to her eyes, piercing yet kind. You must step where he does not expect you. You must see what he believes is hidden. There was a pause. Then Mama Adeola added, her voice low and deliberate. Sometimes to uncover a lie, you must become invisible. Nosipho felt those words settle deep within her. Invisible, not weak, not defeated, but unseen. And in that moment, a plan, quiet, dangerous, and brilliant, began to take shape in her mind. Because Nosipho had realized something Obinna had forgotten. The quietest woman in the room often sees everything. They say the hunter who wishes to catch the cleverest animal must first learn how to walk without leaving footprints. That night, Nosipho did not sleep. She sat by the window watching the city breathe under the weight of secrets. The lights of Lagos flickered in the distance, each one a story, each one a truth, waiting to be uncovered. But her own truth, it lived under her roof, beside the man who no longer saw her, invisible. Mama Adeola's words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat that refused to fade. To uncover a lie, you must become invisible. Nosipho rose slowly, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. She studied her own face, the face Obinna had once loved, the face he now ignored. And in that quiet moment, she made a decision that would change everything. If he cannot see me as his wife, she whispered, her voice steady, then he will see me as something else. The next morning, Nosipho visited Mama Adeola again. "I am ready," she said simply. The old woman looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring not her words but her spirit. Then she nodded. "Then you must leave behind everything he recognizes." And so, the transformation began. Gone were the elegant dresses that spoke of wealth and dignity. Nosipho replaced them with simple faded garments, the kind worn by women who passed unnoticed in crowded homes. Her hair, once carefully styled, was wrapped in a plain scarf. Her posture changed, no longer upright, with quiet confidence, but slightly bent, as if life had weighed her down. Even her voice, she softened it, lowered it, added a slight tremble that spoke of humility instead of strength. "You must not only look different," Mama Adeola instructed. "You must feel different. Become the woman no one remembers." Nosipho practiced until even she barely recognized herself. A new name was chosen. "Zola," she said, testing it on her tongue. "Zola, the invisible one." But a plan, no matter how clever, needs an opening. Nosipho returned home that afternoon, her mind sharp and her heart guarded. The house staff moved quietly through the compound, unaware that their presence would soon be erased from this story. Over the next few days, small changes began to unfold. A cook dismissed after a minor mistake. A housekeeper sent away for carelessness. A driver replaced after a complaint that did not exist. Obinna barely noticed. To him, servants were like shadows, easily replaced, easily forgotten. And Nosipho used that blindness to her advantage. Soon, the house stood with empty spaces where workers once moved. The silence created a need. And where there is need, opportunity follows. Mama Adeola arranged the rest. Through a contact known in the community, a new maid was recommended to the household. A quiet woman named Zola, said to be hardworking, obedient, and invisible. Obinna approved the hire without hesitation. "Just make sure she does her job," he said dismissively, not even asking to meet her properly. And so Nosipho walked back into her own home. As a stranger. The first day was the hardest. She stepped through the gates not as a wife but as a servant. The walls that once held her laughter now watched her in silence. The floors she once walked with dignity now felt cold beneath her careful, measured steps. Obinna sat in the living room as she entered, barely glancing up. "New maid?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Nosipho replied softly. Her voice transformed. He nodded, uninterested. "Do your work well." That was all. No recognition. No pause. No flicker of familiarity. Nothing. And in that moment, Nosipho felt a sharp truth cut through her heart, not because she was surprised, but because she was not. She lowered her gaze, hiding the storm behind her calm expression. "Yes, sir," she repeated. From that day forward, Nosipho no longer lived in her home. She served in it. She cleaned the floors, where secrets would soon unfold. She prepared the spaces where betrayal would reveal itself. She moved through the house like a shadow, present yet unseen. But behind that quiet disguise, her eyes were open, and her heart, though wounded, had never been stronger, because now Nosipho was exactly where she needed to be. Inside the truth. They say when a mask is worn long enough, it does not hide the truth, it reveals it. In the days that followed, Nosipho lived as Zola, moving quietly through the house that once echoed with her own laughter. Now her footsteps were softer, her presence smaller, her voice barely more than a whisper. Yet her eyes saw everything. And what she saw cut deeper than any blade. The first time Halima entered the house openly, Nosipho felt her breath tighten, but her face did not betray her. She stood by the doorway, head slightly bowed, a tray in her hands, as Halima walked in with the confidence of a woman who believed she already belonged. Halima did not look around like a guest. She looked around like a queen, inspecting her future kingdom. "Is this how you keep your home, Obinna?" Halima said with a playful smile, her fingers brushing against the polished table. So quiet, so empty. Obinna chuckled, a sound Nosipho had not heard in months. "It is peaceful, isn't it peaceful?" Nosipho lowered her gaze, gripping the tray just a little tighter. Halima's eyes briefly flicked toward her. "And who is this?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "The new maid, Obinna," replied casually. "Zola." Halima gave a small nod, already losing interest. "Good. At least someone is here to take care of things. Someone. Not Nosipho, not his wife. Just someone." "Bring us drinks," Obinna said, without looking at her. "Yes, sir," Nosipho replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. She turned and walked away, each step measured, each breath controlled. But as she entered the kitchen, her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what she had just witnessed. This was no longer suspicion. This was truth. And truth once seen cannot be unseen. From that day on, Halima's presence became frequent. Too frequent. She came during the day, when the sun was high and judgment was low. She came at night, when shadows hid what pride refused to admit. And each time she moved through the house, as if it were already hers, touching things, rearranging spaces, leaving traces of herself behind, Nosipho watched. She served them tea as they sat too close together. She cleaned the glasses that carried the scent of shared laughter. She passed by rooms where doors were half closed and voices dropped into intimate tones. And sometimes, she heard things she wished she had not. "You deserve more than what you have," Halima whispered one afternoon, her voice smooth like silk. "A man like you should not be tied to someone who cannot match your level." Obinna did not argue. That silence spoke louder than any betrayal. "And what do you suggest?" he asked, his tone low. Halima smiled. Though Nosipho could not see it, she felt it. "I suggest you start thinking about your future, about who truly belongs beside you." Nosipho stood just outside the room, a cloth in her hand, her heart steady, despite the words cutting through her. This was not love. This was calculation. Later that evening, as Nosipho cleared the table, Halima leaned back in her chair, watching her with narrowed eyes. "This maid," Halima said slowly. "She is very quiet." Obinna shrugged. "That is what maids are supposed to be." Halima tilted her head slightly. Quiet people see too much." For a brief moment, Nosipho felt the air tighten around her. But she did not react, because the greatest power of invisibility is control. As the days passed, a strange irony began to unfold. Obinna, the man who had grown cold toward his wife, began to show small kindnesses to the maid. "Zola, have you eaten?" he asked once without thinking. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Make sure you take care of yourself," he added, almost absent-mindedly. Care. A word he no longer gave to Nosipho, yet offered freely to a stranger. Nosipho felt the weight of that irony settle deep within her. He could be kind. He could be gentle. He simply chose not to be with her. But Nosipho did not break. She listened. She observed. She remembered. Because every word Halima spoke, every move she made was a thread. And Nosipho was patiently weaving those threads into something powerful, something undeniable. Because karma does not rush, it waits. And Nosipho was learning how to wait with it. They say a man may run from truth, but he cannot outrun his own conscience. As the days stretched into weeks, something began to shift inside Obinna, quietly at first like the wind before a storm. The laughter he once shared with Halima no longer came as easily. Her words, once sweet like honey, now lingered with a taste he could not quite ignore. And strangely, It was in the presence of Zola, the quiet maid, that his restless heart found moments of peace. One evening, the house stood unusually still. Halima had not come that day, claiming she was busy with important matters. Obinna sat alone in the living room, his tie loosened, his gaze distant. The weight of something unspoken rested on his shoulders. Nosipho still. Zola moved silently as she cleaned the table nearby. Zola, Obinna called suddenly. She paused. Yes, sir. He hesitated as if unsure why he had spoken at all. Then he sighed. Do you ever feel uncertain about people? Nosipho's heart skipped, but her face remained calm. Sometimes, sir. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. You give your trust to someone, and then something inside you begins to question it. There it was, the crack in his certainty. Nosipho lowered her gaze. The heart often sees what the eyes ignore. Obinna glanced at her surprised. You speak like an elder. She gave a small, humble nod. Life teaches, sir. He let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no arrogance in it, only weariness. Halima says I deserve more, that I should think about my future differently. Nosipho felt her chest tighten, but she held her voice steady. And what do you believe, sir? Obinna did not answer immediately. I don't know, he admitted finally. Sometimes things feel right, but other times he trailed off, shaking his head. It is as if something is missing. Missing. The word lingered in the air between them. Nosipho looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since becoming Zola, and in that moment she did not see the proud man who had wounded her. She saw a man, lost inside his own choices. But she did not reveal herself, not yet. Because truth, when revealed too soon, loses its power. Later that week, the tension in the house thickened. Halima returned, but she was different. Her smiles were sharper, her eyes more watchful, and her attention often shifted toward Zola. One afternoon, as Nosipho arranged flowers in the living room, she felt Halima's gaze settle on her like a shadow. You, Halima said suddenly. Nosipho turned, lowering her eyes. Yes, madam. Halima stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the floor. You have been here for some time now. Yes, madam. And yet Halima continued, her voice slow and deliberate. You seem to appear everywhere. Nosipho remained still. I only do my duties, madam. Halima studied her for a moment longer, then smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Be careful, Zola. A maid who sees too much can become a problem. The warning was clear. Obinna, seated nearby, barely looked up. Halima, you worry too much, he said casually. But Halima was not convinced. That night, her true intentions revealed themselves not through kindness, but through greed. Nosipho had gone to the hallway outside Obinna's study, intending to clean. But as she approached, voices drifted through the slightly open door. It is time, Obinna. Halima was saying, her tone firm now, stripped of its usual sweetness. You cannot delay this any longer. Delay what? Obinna asked. The transfer, Halima replied. The properties, the accounts. If we are to build a future together, everything must be secured. There was a pause. Nosipho's breath slowed. I need time, Obinna said carefully. No, Halima snapped, her patience thinning. You need courage. Or are you afraid to let go of what no longer serves you, what no longer serves you? Nosipho felt the weight of those words press against her chest. This was not love. This was strategy. And now, the truth stood fully exposed. Halima did not want Obinna. She wanted what he owned. Nosipho stepped back silently, her mind clear, her heart steady. The game had changed. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about survival. And now, Nosipho knew exactly what she needed to do, because the truth was no longer hidden. It was waiting to be revealed. They say when truth finally stands, even the loudest lies fall silent. The day of the gathering arrived like a storm that had been waiting patiently on the horizon. In Obinna's compound, preparations began early. Chairs were arranged beneath a wide canopy. Elders from the community were invited, men and women whose words carried weight, whose presence turned private matters into public judgment. It was meant to be a simple celebration of success, but Nosipho had woven something deeper into its fabric, because truth, when revealed before witnesses, cannot be buried again. Obinna moved through the space with pride, greeting guests, his voice confident, his smile polished. Halima stood beside him, radiant and composed, dressed in elegance that announced her ambition without apology. To those who did not know better, they looked like a pair destined for power. But Nosipho knew better, and today, everyone would. She moved quietly among the guests as Zola, her head bowed, her hands steady despite the storm within her. Every step she took carried purpose. Every glance she made was measured. Mama Adeola sat among the elders, her eyes calm, already knowing that the moment of reckoning had arrived. As the gathering settled, Obinna raised his hand slightly. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice strong. "Today, we celebrate growth, progress, and the future." "The future," Halima echoed softly beside him, her smile subtle but triumphant. But before Obinna could continue, a quiet voice rose from behind the gathering. "Then let us speak of the truth that will shape that future." The compound fell silent. All eyes turned. Zola stepped forward. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A maid, speaking out of turn. Obinna frowned slightly. "Zola, this is not." But she did not stop. "Sometimes," she said calmly, her voice steady, yet carrying across the compound, "what is hidden in darkness believes it will never see the sun." Halima's expression flickered just for a moment. "What are you doing?" Halima whispered sharply, stepping closer. "Nosipho." Still Zola met her gaze, for the first time, without lowering her eyes. "I am finishing what you began," she replied. The air tightened. Mama Adeola leaned forward slightly. "Let the woman speak," she said, her voice firm with authority. And so Nosipho spoke. She spoke of the late nights, the hidden meetings, the whispers behind closed doors. But more than that, she spoke of intention. From within her simple garment, she brought out documents, copies of papers Halima had pressured Obinna to sign. She recounted word for word the conversation she had overheard in the study, the demand for property transfers, the impatience, the greed hidden beneath charm. Gasps rose among the elders. Halima stepped forward, her composure cracking. "This is madness. She is a maid. What does she know?" Nosipho did not flinch. "She knows what she has seen," she replied calmly. "And what you have said." Obinna's face darkened, confusion, battling disbelief. "Halima, is this true?" Halima laughed sharply, but it was forced. "You would believe a servant over me, but truth does not tremble. It stands." And in that moment, Nosipho reached for the final thread. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hands to her head. The room held its breath. She removed the scarf. Her hair fell free. Then with steady fingers, she straightened her posture, no longer bent, no longer hidden. And when she raised her face fully to the light, silence shattered the air. "Nosipho," Obinna whispered, his voice breaking. Shock rippled through the crowd like thunder. Halima stepped back, her eyes wide, her confidence collapsing in an instant. "No, this is not possible." But it was. Nosipho stood before them, not as a maid, not as a shadow, but as truth itself. "I was always here," she said, her voice calm but powerful, watching, listening, seeing what pride refused to see. Obinna staggered slightly, his world unraveling before him. "All this time, it was you." "Yes," she said, his voice cracked. "And I did not know." Nosipho's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You did not see." "There is a difference." The elders murmured their expressions, shifting from shock to understanding. Halima, now exposed, could no longer hold her mask. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped, desperation creeping into her tone. "He chose me. But Nosipho shook her head gently. No, she said. He chose illusion. And now, the illusion had ended. They say when the masquerade falls, the face beneath must answer for every step it took in disguise. The compound did not erupt into noise. It fell into something far heavier: silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of truth, settling where lies once stood. Halima stood frozen, her chest rising and falling quickly, her eyes darting from face to face, as if searching for an escape that no longer existed. The admiration she once commanded had vanished, replaced by whispers that cut sharper than any insults. A woman who builds her house on another's pain, one elder murmured, should not be surprised when it collapses in public. Halima swallowed hard, but pride still clung to her like a final shield. You all judge too quickly, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound strong. I only wanted what I deserved. Mama Adeola's voice rose calmly from where she sat. What a person deserves is never taken from another's home. It is built with their own hands. And with that, Halima's defense crumbled. She turned to Obinna, desperation now replacing arrogance. Say something, she urged. Tell them this is not how it seems. But Obinna could not speak, because for the first time in a long while, he was seeing clearly. He looked at Nosipho, really looked at her. Not as a shadow in his home, not as a voice he had dismissed, but as the woman who had stood beside him when he had nothing, the woman who had loved him without condition, the woman he had failed to see until she became invisible. His knees weakened slightly as if the weight of his own pride had finally found its place. Nosipho, he said, his voice low, broken. I did not know. Nosipho held his gaze, her expression calm but firm. No, Obinna, she replied gently. You chose not to know. The truth did not shout. It settled, and it stayed. Halima, now stripped of her illusion, could no longer remain. Without another word, she turned and walked away from the compound, her steps no longer confident, her head no longer high. And as she disappeared beyond the gates, so too did the image she had carefully built. Because greed may rise quickly, but it falls even faster. The elders slowly stood, their presence no longer needed. Justice had already spoken. One by one, they left carrying the story with them, because in every village, in every city, stories like these do not stay hidden. They travel, they teach, they warn. Soon only Obinna and Nosipho remained. The space between them felt larger than the entire compound. I have wronged you, Obinna said, finally, his voice heavy with regret. I let pride blind me. I chased what glittered and ignored what was real. Nosipho listened. I thought success meant having more, he continued. More power, more admiration, more attention. But I see now, I was losing the only thing that mattered. His voice trembled. Can you forgive me? The question lingered like a fragile thread. Nosipho took a slow breath, her eyes steady, her spirit unbroken. Forgiveness, she said softly, is not a word spoken to erase pain. It is a path, one that requires truth, humility, and change. She stepped closer, but not too close. I gave you my loyalty, Obinna, she continued. I gave you my silence when you did not deserve it, and I gave you my presence, even when you could not see me. Her voice did not rise, but it carried weight. I will not give you my life again, unless you learn how to value it. Obinna lowered his head, understanding at last that love cannot be demanded, it must be earned. Nosipho turned slightly, looking out beyond the gates where the world continued as it always had. I choose my dignity, she said. And whether she stayed to rebuild or walked away to begin again, one truth remained clear. She had reclaimed herself. They say pride blinds the heart, but humility opens the eyes. And in the end, it was not the disguise that revealed the truth. It was the courage to see it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, where are you watching from, and what would you have done if you were Nosipho?